Joining me in this episode of Working Forward is Kris Kluver. Kris is a strategic advisor, investor, and best-selling author with over 35 years of experience guiding CEOs and leadership teams to achieve extraordinary growth. He has helped drive companies to billion-dollar market caps, facilitated high-stakes turnarounds, and advised leaders through complex challenges across industries like AI, crypto, and private equity. He's also the founder of Peer Circles, an exclusive mastermind for elite leaders looking to solve high-stakes challenges, gain candid feedback, and scale with precision. Known for his candid yet compassionate approach, Kris helps leaders break through ceilings using practical tools and fearless facilitation. He has studied entrepreneurial strategy at Harvard Business School, is a certified exit advisor, and a sought-after speaker. Enjoy this episode. You're listening to Working Forward, a future of work focused podcast from People Forward Network. These episodes pave the road ahead, helping us confidently step into the future as a leader who moves people forward. After all, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Let's go. All right, we got Mr. Kris Kluver joining us on this episode. Kris, I got to tell you, I have been really looking forward to this because you were one of my favorite follows on LinkedIn. Your content is killing it, especially on how to help business leaders think with an entrepreneurial mindset with all of the change that's going on right now. And so to kick things off, as we're starting this conversation off, we've got a lot of things we're going to cover today. But I'd love to just hear from you what stuff you're hearing and seeing from leaders around the country on state of the economy, where we're headed, challenges that they're facing right now. What's some of the top challenges you're hearing about?
Well, Jason, first off, man, thank you so very much for having me on. I am a big fan of the pod. I love what you do, and I love the impact you're having. So thank you for that. As far as what I'm seeing, it's all over the place. I think that, well, just to jump right into what's not comfortable, I think there's been a certain amount of historical approach from our politics that has been in contrast to what maybe some of our business leaders have liked from a productive standpoint. So in a delicate way, but I think I think there's a lot of people out there who are freaking out about Doge. I think there's a lot of people out there who are freaking out about tariffs and all these other things. But there are some massive undertones of of positivity that are coming out of that as well. And the idea, and you look at some of the reshoring, the transitions that are happening. And candidly, if you really get somebody talking on a senior leader level, it's like, well, shit, man, this is the way I have to run my fucking business. Why can't the government run it that way? It just seems, as far as let's go in and actually see what are people doing? Where are we deploying our money? No, we can't run a deficit every year forever. But it's just as a business owner, we can't do that. Now, I do get a strong sense that people are being fairly pragmatic about it when it comes to the idea, though, that this is probably going to be rocky for a while, that we're not necessarily going to see a magic bullet that suddenly makes everything better in the next 3 to 6 months. I think it could be 12, 18 months personally before we get through some of this rockiness. Now, with Trump, I'm whether you love him, hate him, I personally like some of the policies he's doing. I think the approach can be a little lumpy at times. But with this, I think the tariffs and things like that are his negotiating style. I've been on the other side of the table with some of his other companies, and I have some familiarity with that negotiating style. And it is a bull in a china shop, and it pisses people off, and it is not politically correct, and it's lumpy, to say the least. I think the intentions are solid, but when we get there, I think it's going to have some pretty negative impacts on some organizations, especially people who are very sensitive, commodity-based type things for people who may be sensitive on importing. So there's a lot of excitement in what's happening in the politics area. That seems to be one of the top of minds. But then the other couple of areas that people see that we're not really sure about are, we look at automation, and we look at machine learning and AI and everything that's associated with that. And the massive, massive displacement we're going to see out of that is almost hard to comprehend. And there are those who think of it as utopian and it's going to change everything. I happen to be one of those. I think after listening to your last podcast with Vince, man, I think everything is going to change. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of leaders. I talked with somebody yesterday, a large aerospace company. And the senior leader's like, yeah, I think it's pendulum swung too far. It's like, oh my God, you've got your head in the sand, man. You are going to get the extinction events I think we're going to see in businesses is going to be massive, massive over the next few years. So there's two other factors. One is the idea of what's happened with money and the cost of money, and the idea that, especially in the private equity and VC space, you go back even 2 years and money was at about 4%. And if you're a private equity firm, a blind monkey can make money when they can borrow it at 4%. They can do their roll-ups and assemblages of the different businesses. But when money starts to get to 8%, that business model changes dramatically. And the vast majority of the analysts that are in the private equity space the analysts are young game. It chews them up and spits them out. They only knew low interest rates. So having these high interest rates is a paradigm shift in understanding how those things work. So now that the opposite side is we have about $3 trillion, as I understand it, on the sidelines that's ready to be deployed. So we've got a lot of money that can be deployed, but the leverage on that money is bad. So businesses are going to have to run a lot better. They're going to have to adapt. And then the third thing is, if you look at the geopolitical world combined with the tariffs that are getting placed, but also you can look at some of the population implosions that are happening in Germany, in China, in Japan. The sheer numbers, the fact that they aren't going to have enough people to even maintain a lot of what they're doing, the potential for supply chain disruption is just massive. So we've got this convergence of all this really crazy, huge stuff that is either A, going to freak out business owners, or B, it's going to get them really, really, really excited. Because the key is remembering that with great disruption comes great opportunity. But we have to be able to step back and do things differently. So as a long-winded answer, you got me on a long-winded podcast or long form podcast, so I can be long-winded.
That's right, man. Take as much time as you need. I love that. So a few things there. I'm an optimist too, and I hope everyone who listens to the show knows, even when we bring up controversial topics and stuff like that, the purpose is not just to stir up, that stuff, but to think critically about what's the direction we're headed. How do we make this future even better than the present that we have? I think that's something that everyone can unify around. And, the thing with change is it's hard. Whether we're talking on a micro level, like you're trying to consistently get to the gym and be healthier, change is a freaking hard thing. And changing for the future of work is a really big piece. And you just laid out 3 huge things we're currently going through that feels like the overarching kind of theme here is we're going through a metamorphosis. Like our economy is. Like we're kind of like in the chrysalis, and we're about to emerge as a butterfly and have a totally different economy from what we've known. I've brought this up before, Chris, and I'd love your thoughts and reaction to it. Even the traditional concepts of supply and demand, those will never go away. But we've always operated under the assumption with human capital, human labor, that that we can only keep up with the demand side to the extent that the supply side can keep up. What happens when that's flipped? What happens when supply can always outpace demand? Because we have the productivity with artificial intelligence and robotics and advanced things like that that'll be able to keep up beyond what demand may be for certain services. At some point you think that when we get to that should make things more affordable, that we shouldn't have to deal with inflation as much as what we have historically. But the other thing, too, I'd like your reaction to is, you mentioned just kind of like the temperature right now feels like it needs to come down a little bit, in my opinion. Like the ends justifying the means. Hey, I get that there's some cleanup, some things trying to be done to be more fiscally conservative, and I'm all for that. But does everything have to be done and all the jobs be axed within like a month or two and stuff like that? Can there be a strategic approach to thinking about what are the most important positions? What is the direction that needs to head? Let's have a plan in place. Let's have a backup plan in place for what we're going to do for those who may be displaced. It just feels like, the easy thing to do, in my opinion, is be like, fired, done. Like, right? But what's the plan for what you're going to do after that in terms of upskilling, reskilling, providing opportunity for people? Because as you pointed out, we know historically the data is clear that as unemployment rises, so do crime, so do substance abuse issues. Like, work is such a sacred thing in our lives that's really important for us to feel grounded to purpose, to get some of our identity and meaning from it. And if all of a sudden there's massive displacement, whether it be from, a lot of government positions being cut or eventually displacement from AI, I get that. But what's our plan for what we're going to do to equip and make sure that we just don't have like this enormous vacuum all of a sudden of people that are like, how am I going to pay for my bills? What am I going to do with my time? What does my future look like? And it feels like that's kind of the theme that's coming out in some of the Gallup data too. This was really fascinating. A few weeks ago, Gallup came out with their annual report on what are the number one traits, the top traits that folks are looking for from leadership. And trust has always been number one until now. What do you think overtook trust, Chris? What is number one now above trust that people look for from leadership?
Consistency. That's just a guess and no idea.
I bet that one's high on the list. It actually was hope.
Huh.
Hope is number one now. So it just, to everything that you led off with, that you're talking about, these macro trends, at the end of the day, we've got a lot of people that aren't feeling a lot of hope. They're scared. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about the future. And what I'd like to see from leadership across the board is more that steadiness that you're talking about, more of that, yes, we're going to go through some pretty big changes. It's inevitable, the direction that we're headed, but we have a plan for what this means for everyone and to get everyone in a better place. Those are the kinds of things that I would like to start hearing from leadership, instead of we're just cut, and like, okay, that's fine, but what's the plan moving forward for how we're getting to a better place? Those are the things that concern me.
Understood. And I appreciate that. And I'm sorry if I, in hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have started off with some of the.
No, it's good, man. I like
piece,
that.
But that's where we are, and it's like, screw it, let's go there. So two things. One, there's a book called The Rational Optimist that I got years ago from a friend of mine.
I like the sound of that.
It's a fascinating book, and I'm going to mangle parts of it, but it talks about, and I'm paraphrasing, in essence, that humans are the only animals on the planet with the ability to look at the past with nothing but fondness and the future with nothing but trepidation, even though there is zero empirical data to show anything but the opposite. Now, that's a paraphrase of that, but in the book, they actually go through and they prove that through using like a lumen of light and how much energy it took when you were a caveman to get a lumen of light, all the way to now we turn on LED and we don't even think about it. So the amount of trade for time, energy for those things. So from an optimistic standpoint, I am positive with it, and where things are going. I have a different perspective just when I've worked with, and I've had some companies that I've worked with and had to shepherd the CEO through a 40% plus RIF, realignment and force. And nobody likes that. And it is scary and it is uncomfortable. However, I always encourage that we cut deeper, faster, because otherwise it's like slowly pulling the Band-Aid off little by little by little by little. Now, I am not, don't get me wrong, I am not disagreeing with you as far as communication and understanding and hope and understanding where we are going. But as an analogy, I just finished a great bucket list trip with my wife down to the Antarctic. We came back through Argentina and spent time in southern tip called a town called Ushuaia, and some time in Buenos Aires. Now, President Milei went through, and I don't know if you know the background of Argentina is it was an absolute train wreck for the economy. When my wife and I were there 26 years ago, the dollar was pegged to the peso. So $1 for 1 peso. This trip, when we were there, it was $1 to 1,150 pesos.
Wow.
That's how much it had got out of control. And this had come through graft. It had come through unregulated spending throughout the government. The government expanded. It got crazy. President Milei came in, and he campaigned, and he actually walked around with a silver-plated looking chainsaw. And that was his campaign, is he was going to cut the daylights out of government. And he actually cut through, and in their area, they didn't have departments, they had ministries, but he cut entire ministries. He took that government that was upside down and they made the budget positive. They had a surplus within a year. Now, walking around I had some curveballs there, but for the most part, I talked to police, I talked to different people. People felt pretty positive about it. The energy was there. The inflation, literally, the year he went in was at 100% plus for the year. Now it's down in the 20s. That still sucks. It's hard to make a living at that, but things are going in the right direction. And by that nature, to your point, I think it's actually given people a lot of hope that there is change and that things are getting stronger. But it didn't happen right away. And I think he might have been better at communicating those things. But it gave me hope seeing where that was. And then also understanding that, because this was about a year and a half, 2 years ago that they've been working through this. But some of what our current leadership is doing isn't just off the top of their head. There is a little bit of, there's some models that they're following, and they're taking pieces and parts. And I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with any or all of it. But I think that the greatest way to give hope for people is to help them start seeing positivity in what's in the economy and in those trusts. Now, could the communication be better? Dude, I preach communication. Communication can always be better. And is bull in a china shop the right way to approach things? I do not think so. But I don't have that person's ear to to have any impact.
Right. At the end of the day, I think as long as people are feeling better, like, hey, my wages are increasing. We've got money if we're a young family to be able to go on a family vacation. If we have some friends that we know that have been struggling financially, hey, if it looks like this is starting to turn around for them and they're in a better spot, I think most people, that when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, if we have the hope that this is going to lead to a place where maybe we have fewer people living in poverty, that maybe if there's additional wealth and surplus and abundance that's created as we start leaning more into AI, like you and I talked about, I'm a utopian as well. I'm like, hey, this is going to be great. It's going to bring down healthcare prices. It's going to eventually bring down grocery prices and stuff like that when we get there. As long as we can get there, that's good. The thing we don't want to happen is, I believe it was Stephen Hawking talked about this, is that his biggest fear with AI wasn't that it was going to take over the world, but was a more practical concern. And that was that it would create the largest chasm between the haves and the have-nots, so that the Matthew effect would become even bigger. That basically those that already had wealth, power, influence, and control, that would just be accelerated with AI and kind of consolidate more of that toward that direction. And that could happen, but I don't believe that's in the best interest of society, right? For obvious reasons. And that's why I still hold out hope, is that's not a good setup for any country, for any economy, for that to happen. What's best is when you're able to equip people to have healthy, happy lives, and then they produce incredible, creative, amazing work. And I think that transition is going to be a challenging one, but I'm very optimistic that if we can eventually come up with a smart way of doing universal basic income, making sure that the additional wealth that can and we're expecting is going to be created from artificial intelligence, that it's not just to line pockets of the wealthy. There's going to be some of that has to happen in a capitalistic society, but that this provides a great opportunity for a certain type of distribution to elevate and raise the lives of everyone, especially those that may particularly be more affected if there's certain job displacement from AI, and figuring out what is that next job, maybe that next mission, that next thing that I want to do, but not having to worry about, am I going to be able to pay the electric bill this month? Am I going to be able to go out and afford to go get a gallon of milk to feed my kids? Like we've got to make sure we're eliminating those type of issues. And I believe we can get there with advancements, the AI tools that it's going to give us that we haven't had before.
So where my head goes is, and I agree with you on all of that, in that another book called 4,000 Hours, or 4,000 Weeks, which is roughly the number of weeks that as a human we live. And it talked about how up until the Industrial Revolution, roughly 150 years ago, as a as a species, we had existed in agrarian time, meaning that if you go out to milk the cow, you didn't give yourself 6.5 minutes to milk the cow. You went out and milked the cow, whatever time it took. If you were tired, you'd lay down and sleep. It wasn't until we transitioned to industrial time that we started trading time for money. And unfortunately, then cortisol levels go up because we still realistically haven't evolutionarily adapted to it. And initially, it was people were working literally seven days a week, 12 hours a day, trading time for money. And that was what it was. But and my point here is that it was when Henry Ford and some other old crusty white guys got together and said, maybe if we didn't work them 12 days or 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, maybe if we worked them 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, and we paid them just a little bit more, they actually could become part of our market. And that would actually expand our market in a huge way, so that they actually created this self-fulfilling prophecy. And I would anticipate that we may see something as well happen when we start looking at some of the impacts of artificial intelligence and machine learning and automation. That there will be certain, if we can figure out a positive incentive for people to have a universal income, to have those basics covered, I think that will become stronger and stronger. And I think the biggest challenge for AI and for people is actually, maybe it'll be the disparity, but I think the biggest challenge is figuring out how the UX, the user experience, how AI can adapt its ability to change so fast to us, the hairless apes, to figure out so it doesn't freak us out too much. And I think that focusing on how to handle that, because we're worrying about these things, but then I think about, like, the first time I took a Waymo. Have you done a Waymo yet?
I haven't yet, but I've had some friends that posted videos. It looks interesting.
It's crazy, man. You're sitting there, you're at the airport in Phoenix, you hit the app, it comes up, it says, this is your number, and you have to put in a code, and it unlocks the doors, and you get in. And for like the first 3 or 4 minutes, you watch the wheel turn. You're like, oh, okay, did fine. It accelerates around. Oh, shit.
Right.
And then 5 minutes later, you're in a conversation with your friend in the back, and you're like, holy shit, we just adapted to a completely driverless, something that should be scary as shit.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow there was a trust that it was okay. We got to see how it worked, and we adapted quickly to it. So I think that as long as the incentives are aligning in the right way, Charlie Munger, the Warren Buffett's number 2, show me the incentives and I'll tell you the outcomes. As long as the incentives and the outcomes are aligned in the right way, and I think that AI will be able to see that, because there's a synergy around all of that it makes more sense. I think that it's going to be less of an issue than a lot of people are looking at, but it's our fear of the unknown that is what's making it there. That quote that was, the future with trepidation. It's because that's how we're wired.
Mm-hmm.
We had no idea we're still worried about walking around the corner and seeing a tiger. Whether we believe it or not, we still have that evolutionary impact in our head. So being able to get out of that way, I think, is part of it.
To that point. So you got me thinking about my mortality here. You're talking about 4,000 weeks, Chris. We're talking about tigers around the corner. We're talking about hopping in cars without drivers. You got me thinking about mortality here. But I think, a litmus test, if you ask most people around the world, what's the litmus test for how they're feeling about life? Most of the time it's going to come down to health, and it's going to come down to wealth. Not saying that that's everything, but a lot of times those are 2 big factors that people are going to point to. Am I healthy? How am I doing in terms of my health? Do I have any diseases or things going on, or just challenges that are making it really hard for me to do the things I want to do physically or my lifespan? And then the other thing is, do I have access to be able to do the things I want to do? And to take my family to go do things, or go on adventures and see the world and that kind of stuff. And to your point, the things with AI that seem very realistic, that are within our grasp, that we will eventually hit, is going to help in those 2 areas. Think about our ability to eradicate cancer, to have different types of treatments to prevent the onset of like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, for example. This isn't science fiction. These are things, if you're staying clued in to the stuff that's coming out from MIT, Johns Hopkins University, these things are currently in play, are being tested. And artificial intelligence models at some of those universities are actually helping them come up with new ways of thinking about how to treat and battle disease. And then on the other side too, like we were talking about, think about whenever we're able to have supply outpace demand, and instead of your eggs costing whatever it is now, I know that's been a big hot topic, whether it's $8, $10, $12, I'm not sure what it is right now. I'd have to ask Rachel, my wife, whenever she goes to get those. But I'm like, my goodness, like what if it gets back down to where, like, because we have so much abundance and the ability to get those where they need to be, that the prices are able to be less than 50%, maybe more than that, of what they currently are. So that picture of that utopian future, the reason I'm sharing that and I want to lean into it is there may be naysayers that are like, no, that'll never happen. We're already starting to see advances that direction that are starting to happen, not necessarily in the price, but that the stuff is being worked on that we're starting to unlock and solve with artificial intelligence help, that if we just left it up to our own devices, maybe would have taken us hundreds, thousands more years to still figure that out. Supply chain issues, like these things of being able to solve world hunger, to get clean water to every single human being in the world. Those things are no longer a pipe dream. We're going to be able to make those things happen. And that's the optimistic side of where we're headed. That hopefully people are hearing today is, despite all the disruption, despite a lot of the challenges, a lot of the change that's going on, and it's happening fast and furious, do hold on to that hope, because there is tremendous opportunity and abundance that's on the other side. But we have to make sure that we're doing it in a way, and we're going through our channels to make sure our elected representatives and everyone who is one of those stakeholders is helping make those decisions, that we're doing it in a really smart way. Let's talk a little bit, Chris, segue into flexible work, because I know you've had some incredible posts about this whole concept of life-work integration. And I think it ties into what we've been talking about, because at first it seemed like there were a lot of people that were like, yay, I'm excited to be able to work from home. But now it seems like I'm starting to hear from some more people, at least in my circles, that's like, I'm ready to go back to the office. It's tough to work from home, of juggling and trying to, kind of do life and personal, or life and work stuff intermixed throughout the day, and feel like you're kind of sputtering. And that there's some people that are like, I kind of would like to get back to the black and white of like, hey, I'm going to work from these hours, and then when I cut it off, I'm not thinking about work in the evening, thinking about checking my Slack messages, checking my emails and stuff like that. So let's talk and lean a little bit into life work integration. What are you seeing around that right now? Any thoughts around it?
Well, do you mind if we take a half step back as far as your efficiencies piece?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was at I've got a client that's in the blockchain Web3 space, and it was cool. We got to help them. I got to stand on the podium a few months ago, and they rang the bell on the New York Stock Exchange, which was great.
That's awesome.
And I didn't know anything about it when I started working with them. But I remember going to the Bitcoin conference. And the first one I went to was just bizarro, man. It was like a combination of, if you mixed Burning Man and Berkshire Hathaway event and threw it in a blender. But
wow.
But there was some conversations from economists, and one of them touched on what you hit in a little different way, in that if you factored in over the last 30 years inflation, what people haven't factored into our inflationary area is that we've had roughly a 10% increase in efficiencies every year. So as an example, if you think about, I'm 57, and I remember buying CDs, music CDs. Well, you can still buy a music CD, but it's cheaper now than it was then, because the technology on those things has gotten better and better and better and better. You look at a lot of our commodities. You look like a t-shirt, a basic, ultra basic t-shirt 20 years ago is about the same price as it is now. So we've seen all sorts of different efficiencies, and we've been able to expand our consumer good footprint and what we have, but it's been sort of absorbed in what it is. what I believe AI, machine learning, and all the automations are going to do is it's going to accelerate that in a massive way. So I have 100% confidence to what you're saying in the efficiencies of things, because when you can suddenly get all of your infrastructure for moving stuff, you get your infrastructure for how you actually maximize and build things. Everything is going to start running much, much, much more efficiently, much more affordably. The companies are going to be able to maintain their margins, and ideally, as long as we have competition among those companies, those margins will drop. Just like when you love it or hate it, you could argue that Walmart has done better, has done more for middle America than anybody and low income, because they commoditized. Now they destroyed a lot of small communities by doing it, but they made everything so much more efficient that people were able to buy things much more reasonably and efficiently. And I think that those are some kind of ham-fisted analogies that are similar, but it's going to happen a lot faster in these other areas when you look at whether it be AI or automation or an integration of both of them. But I don't know, Jason, what do you think of that? Did that land, or does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, it absolutely does. A couple companies that come to mind for me too is like Costco and Buc-ee's. Thinking about, how well they do, compared to Walmart too, in terms of how they're able to compensate. So as you're able to improve margin, operate your business better, that you're actually, I think the starting wages at some of those places like at Costco and Buc-ee's, as you get full benefits. But then on top of that, I think like the starting wages a lot of times is like $20 an hour or something like
I
that.
did 25 at Costco. Yeah.
And so to think like, what if AI helps unlock for a lot more businesses the ability to do that? To be able to raise wages, for everybody. I mean, that's just a future that seems very realistic as we improve the efficiencies at scale that you were just talking about. What's interesting about that, Chris, two things that have come out recently in terms of where we are today. I know we've been talking kind of long-term vision future of utopian, where we're eventually going to be with AI, where we want to be. But just talking today, Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon came out with an interesting study that was looking at the use of AI currently. And this was fascinating to me. I mean, I'm curious you heard about it. Already, we're starting to see a self-reported decline in critical thinking skills from people because of how much they're using AI right off the bat to start solving challenges of things that they're working on projects. Did you hear about that or see it?
I heard about it on your podcast with Vince, and I
Okay.
actually liked his response, but I'm not familiar with the study, so I don't know the details within it. But it's fascinating, but where my head went with it is, how are they measuring and how are they quantifying critical thinking?
Real quick, it's self-report. So these people are reporting it themselves. But I'm not sure like what the actual like questions were or how it was set up. But that was the piece that to me wasn't like, hey, someone else is telling you, hey, I think you're not using your critical thinking skills. These are people self-reporting that are like, hey, I'm starting to notice like I'm not thinking as critically about my job and decisions that I make, and I'm offloading and sending a lot of that to AI instead.
So I don't know. I don't, because where my head goes is, I can remember 3 TV stations, pre-cable, and let alone social platforms, and let alone living on your life on with your thumbs, looking at something. I think that a lot of the younger kids now, people under 30, who are completely native to that, they've rewired their brains in different ways. And I think differently than they do. But I don't think that the way they're doing it is wrong. They're just adapting to tools and using those tools in a different way. So I'm just kind of wondering if in that report, their version of what they think is critical thinking, maybe it is changing.
Mm.
But maybe the way that they're getting better at asking the right prompts is a different variant, and they're looking at problems in a different way. Because critical thinking, to me, especially for like a senior CEO, is really looking downfield and defining what are the big issues that need to be addressed. And then how do we frame a question around that? And then getting AI to help you solve that problem. Maybe traditional way of critical thinking, well, we got to solve these problems. Well, maybe that's shifting, and that it's going to be, no, we need to define what amazing is. What are the challenges we're facing? And then how do we ask the right questions? And just like a 20-year-old with with their phone, how do they use the tools available in a different way? So I think we're adapting fairly quickly, but that's me being hopeful on it, but I don't know.
So I think there's something there. You think about it. This is a crude example, but you think about when calculators were coming out. All of us didn't all of a sudden not know how to do math. Yeah, we relied more on calculators because it's like, hey, I want a quick and easy answer here instead of me having to do like long division here, writing it out by hand. But we're still taught and we learn those things. So I think that's a good point that you bring up, is maybe we're just recalibrating in terms of what we think about critical thinking, because in order to get good output from AI, in terms of a good, precise answer that seems reasonable, you got to have the critical thinking to know how to frame the question in the prompt of what you're wanting it to do on the front end in order to get a good response on the back end. So I'm following what you're saying there. That makes sense.
Well, and for me, I got an Apple IIc, which was their second generation.
Do you still have it?
No, I wish I did.
I'm about to say, yeah, man, that'd be a relic right there.
I do have old Blackberries. Those are kind of funny with the QWERTY word. But I remember then that, because I'm fairly dyslexic and I can't spell for shit, and I'm not sure on the mechanics of the word processing. And what those tools have allowed me to do is focus more on what my genius is, not have to put a whole bunch of energy into trying to make something else fit in and work to comply with something else. So I think that obviously there's going to be adaptations, and there's going to be people who get it and they're lazy and they abuse it. But I think on the grand scheme of things, if people are using it as a tool and it allows them to, because maybe somebody's not great at doing a lot of problem solving, but they're really great at seeing vision in the future. Oh my God, this could make that person, give them superpowers. So I don't know. I don't know with that.
It's interesting to think about because I mean, I don't know what the percentage is now, but to think like ChatGPT, did it just have like its 2-year or 3-year anniversary in terms of being public when it was launched to the public for public use? But it feels like now things have flipped, where it used to be, how many of you are using ChatGPT? Like if I'm at a conference speaking or something like that, it used to be like that number was, pretty small. And now it feels more like it's like as common as someone having a mobile phone kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, I'm dabbling in it. I might be dabbling in Claude a little bit. I might be dabbling in Gemini. So it feels like a lot more people, instead of it being a nebulous type thing, more of them are starting to dive in, different levels of expertise and comfort with it. But just what I'm seeing and hearing is it looks like there's more people that are starting to use it, which I think is a good thing, because those are probably going to be really important skills in the future that we'll need to have almost regardless of industry or role, is being able to know how to communicate and articulate really well and work with the AI almost like it's a teammate, or if it's your boss in a particular instance.
Oh, I 100% agree with the idea of being a teammate and ways to use it. So I think like if you go back to Apple and when they created the Apple Store, the genius was that with that is that they didn't create all the apps. They created a platform that people could build whatever app they wanted on. And now there's infinite number of apps. I think that a lot of the AI platforms are using the same thing, and it's going to get used in ways we can't even imagine. I live about 100 miles west of Denver, 10,000 feet buried in the woods, and love spending my time in the woods and quiet time and all that. But we had dinner with a friend last night, and he's building out a Sprinter van, because that's what we do here in the mountains. Is we have our hipster Sprinter van. And he's 72, and he's using Claude as his collaborative partner in building out his van the way he wants it.
That's cool.
And what doesn't. And I'm just like, he's using AI to build his van, and source materials and get everything he needs out of it. So I think, again, it goes back to us, our ability to, if ChatGPT or any of the platforms that are out there, Gemini or Claude, the more that they can focus on creating an interface that allows us to interact easier and faster with it, the more we're going to adopt and adapt with it, I believe.
That's so good. That brought to mind to me, we were talking earlier about, you're talking about how you don't have time to read books, and so you're doing podcasts more. I'm about to lay my dirty laundry out here. I don't read books either anymore. not because I'm against it, but because of time. So here's what I do, Chris. If I see a book that's coming out from an author or a topic that I really want to learn about, I just ask and prompt ChatGPT to basically give me the Cliff Notes version. Tell me the main takeaways that I need to know from this book, and I've got it in a few seconds. And it's like,
It's
okay,
fantastic.
cool. Let me update my schema. Da-da-da. Almost like on the Matrix, right? It's like, I don't know how to do this helicopter yet. Let me upload into the Matrix. Okay, now I know how to fly this helicopter. It's like, okay, cool. I just uploaded or downloaded the most important information, uploaded it into my schema, adjusting my schema, my learning on this topic, and then I move on to the next one. Not that I'm suggesting people to stop reading books. I don't want you to hear that today. But what I'm saying is if you're finding that challenge of keeping up with the latest information, it feels like it's happening so fast, lean into the tools that can help slow it down for you. And that is, I don't have time to read this 300-page book that just came out, but I really want to know what's important about it. Lean into AI to give you a summary on it. So, and I love that your friend is using it to figure out how to, just dap up his Sprinter van. That's killer too.
Well, and like so I have an AI twin that's available to my clients through the peer groups.
Okay.
And I've been working on it for almost 2 years, where it's every one of the blog posts, everything that comes out. I would do a video of the blog post. My chief of staff would transcribe it, drop it into my Kluver GPT. It would create a blog post. I would go through and rewrite and edit it. It would put it back and it would learn what I liked and didn't like about it. And it's downloaded my books. It's downloaded almost 300 hours of videos and 500 blog posts. So all of this has been put into this chat. But what you just said there is, I think I should be asking my chat, what books are out there today that I should be reading, and give me, but actually start understanding and leveraging that up even more. And what are the takeaways and trends that are coming that I need to be more aware of? But again, it's me investing that time to say what is highest and best use, and how can I make sure I'm using these tools in the right way? Because part of it is I still enjoy leisure reading when I can, and I'm studying to be a pilot, and those things I can't offload yet. But I love the idea around that on the books.
The it calls to mind too. Again, not that I'm telling people not to read books, but if you're struggling to keep up, that's one thing to do. But still, the importance of reading. One of the things that came out, and I saw Adam Grant posted about this. It wasn't his research, but he was referencing it a few months ago. Is there's now definitive proof through a meta-analysis that reading with a physical book in your hand, that the connection, the learning is deeper than digital reading. Like if you're reading off of your phone, or if you're reading off of a tablet or a screen of some kind. I didn't dig in deep enough to understand why that is, but that was an interesting aha moment for me that, that I'm a very digital person. I'm always digital this, digital this, digital this. But sometimes there is something tangible or physical about it, about the way that our brains learn, absorb information, draw conclusions, think, come up with new ideas, that sometimes the tactile thing may be helpful too.
Oh, I could see that 100%. I use a headset, and then I try, and we can talk a little bit about the work integration that we were bringing up, but I try and book 3-4 hour blocks a week where I go out on my own into the woods. And whether that's hiking or biking or skiing or something. And a lot of times it's quiet time, but it's also time where I'm consuming podcasts or books or audio pieces. And again, I can consume those a lot faster that way than by me reading just the way my brain's wired.
I love that. I love that. So here's another thing about AI that I wanted to get your opinion on too, is I was looking for the study. It wasn't Gartner, but it was a group like that. And they're looking at currently, is AI creating less work for people or creating more work for people? And I'll have to look up the study while you're providing some context here. But overwhelmingly, the data was showing that for most people, it's actually creating more work where we currently are. In other words, what's being experienced is, yes, I'm more efficient, I'm getting more of my work done, but that means the next thing or next things are coming at me faster. Or if I'm on a team and there's kind of like a linear approach in terms of, hey, once this person's done with theirs, it comes to me next for the things that I need to do on this project, that there's people experiencing, if there's someone on the team that's using AI and they're getting their stuff done fast, then it's coming faster and flowing faster to the next person, kind of like a domino set in line. And it's like, whoa, this is coming at me way faster than what it used to be. Any initial thoughts or reactions to that concept of, where we are currently with AI? Might we be in a place where it's actually creating more work for us because we are getting certain things done faster, but it's putting more on our plate? What do you think about that?
My head goes to two things specifically. One, I think part of it is it's a new tool. So people are having to, and they're not well adapted at using it yet. So by that nature, learning how to use the tool, educating themselves, getting comfortable with what it isn't second nature yet. So part of that could be it's taking more time from a user interface experience just to figure out what and how and trust. And it's just like, if you've ever gone downhill skiing, the first time you go, it's lumpy and you're nervous and you're locked up and you're double checking everything. But when you've done it, 100 times, it's super flowy and fast and easy. I think that there's a certain amount of that. The second thing that what I'm hearing is that I think most people are using AI to do the same stuff in the same way they have in the past. They're just doing it faster. And I think that's wrong. I think what we really need to do is look at it, because that puts us in a reactionary state. And 90% of the people on the planet live life in a reactionary state. One of the key things in my peer circles and when I do the coaching with my CEOs is I want to help them transition from a reactive state to a proactive state. Rarely are people actually stopping and saying, okay, why are we doing this? What is the intended outcome? What does success look like for what this is supposed to be? Is this the right process? Because more often than not, processes are created out of mistakes and shit shows and things that went wrong, rather than what went right and how can we make these things better. So I think, just guessing, but if people were to actually take a step back and really define it differently, what are we trying to achieve? And is this the right way? But I don't know that people are always using the tool in the right way. I think they may just be using the tool to, run faster on the hamster wheel. And as a result, it feels like they're working more.
That's interesting. And so that kind of gets into the agentic capability, like, hey, can I spin up something that can consistently do this particular type of task for me on the regular, i.e., maybe if you're in a company and you need like a type of an agent that just handles a lot of the social media aspect. I love that you talked about a twin. I want to get to that here in a minute too. Dig more into your digital twin. But if you set that up, if you take the time to do it, as opposed to, hey, each day I'm going in and I'm going to prompt ChatGPT to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. If you take the time to think back, think about how to program it to start automating and doing those things on its own, then to your point, that probably does help with the productivity. Let's go back to the digital twin. I want to dig into that a little bit more. What's your experience been like with that?
Lumpy.
Okay.
It's a little lumpy getting it started, to be candid, but it's my belief, and one of the things that I teach, particularly with like entire leadership teams, is I think if we have three horizons, one horizon would be you have the legacy knowledge and existing tools that you have today. The third horizon, way out there in the future, is a state that you think could be, that doesn't exist today, but could be. And then the middle horizon is the one that bridges those two. As an executive leadership coach, I would like to think that I have unique abilities when I'm advising people and connecting things and connecting dots and reading people today. But I make no bones that in 2 years, 5 years, there will be AI coaches that can read body language, that can understand things, that will do a very, very good job. But it's mine to lose now. I have a dramatic volume of content. I've got 30 years experience. So how can I start on that middle horizon of transition? And to me, that's where my AI twin is. My AI twin is that starting down that path. The old adage, the best time to plant a tree 30 years ago, the second best time today. So if I think that a brilliant thing I could do now is to trip and stumble and build something that's even starting with it, that's starting to take that legacy knowledge, that's starting to build it in there. But then my intention then is, as I grow my peer circles, and we figure out a way to record everything that happens, but redact it, then we're going to be able to put in hundreds and hundreds of conversations into that AI that then can be used to help solve problems for over and over. And it will, ideally, I want to work myself out of a job, and it becomes more valuable than I am down the road. And then I can just go out and preach and talk about it. But it's freaky though. The fact that I speak Dutch now and I can, answer these
Right.
questions, and how quick and easy it was. But again, it's cobbling two or three different groups together to put it all together. I'm not even sure my chief of staff and her team does most of that. But I like the idea that if it's my voice and tone and I'm coaching a CEO, then I can offer this to the entire leadership team or the entire company. And they're like, yeah, I'm having a problem with so-and-so, and I don't know how to have this crucial conversation. Or, man, somebody's doing this and this and this. What am I missing? Or, boy, we've got these 19 things we're trying to do for strategy. How do we narrow it down to 3? Now, is it going to be perfect? No, but if it starts to leverage out, that gets fascinating. That really juices me up, because my personal goal, I call them life-changing goals, is to introduce 1 million people to a new way of thinking, impacting countless lives. This helps me drive that. Being on your podcast today helps me with that. So thank you again.
Well, in a very small way, maybe 5. Maybe we'll contribute like 5 to that, right, Chris?
Okay, 5, maybe 7.
Right. So quick question on that digital twin. I got to ask this: is do the folks know? So those executives, if they're interacting with your avatar, with your twin, do they know that? Or from their perspective, are they like, this is actually Chris that I'm having this conversation with?
No, it's very much known. So it's on the website, and it says if you can click to say if you want to interact with Chris, click, and then it says, can we access your audio? And then, yeah, hey, great, welcome. Ask me a question. How can I help?
That's so cool.
And what I'm working on is, so first tier customer service is way deep in the weeds on reading body language. So like even micro expressions and things so if somebody zooms in and like, yeah, I'm happy, and they'll be able to, the AI will be able to answer, the twin will be able to answer. And if I don't answer the question, be like, hey, look, maybe that didn't land because, if somebody had a frown, or they like, what did I hit that question right, or do you need more clarity? And but the fact that we're here now, and the fact that that's what's available on a commercial level for somebody who's kind of doing this, dude, you think where this will be in a year? It's just,
yeah. The ability to read the room type stuff you're talking about. And already, like, there have been some of the studies, I think it may have been Harvard or Columbia, I can't remember. We're starting to look at, they're asking patients that had the opportunity to kind of like engage with an AI type doctor or nurse, kind of what was the bedside manner like compared to typical human service that you get. And already there's starting to be preferences for like, hey, you know what? The AI, it did a better job listening to me. It did a better job of empathizing with me, which is fascinating.
My buddy who's building the van out is a retired doc.
Okay.
And I don't have but he shared that article with me on how, because the AI physician is not in a hurry. It's ultra present. It's more empathetic. It's more curious, and it's clear on the communication. So people like, I've had this discussion with friends like, oh God, I'm not going to go to an AI doctor. It's like, hell no, man. As soon as I can, I want an AI doctor, because I know that guy isn't hungover or distracted or just got in a fight with his kids, or, And it doesn't mean that we don't need people to take a look at it again and do high level checks on them, but it's pretty fascinating.
And I don't know the number. I'd have to look it up here. That's what I was doing earlier with the Upwork thing, with the survey. We'll come back to that in a minute. But the number of deaths that are due to mistakes by healthcare professionals, not on purpose, but just because of the chaos and things. And there's communication gaps that happen when people are changing shifts as nurses and stuff like that happen in hospitals. I don't know the number, but I know it's a pretty high percentage. It would be alarming to most of us, the number of folks that end up passing away as a result inside hospitals because of an accident or a mistake, because of that in the communication. And to think that we could be on the precipice of eliminating a lot of those mistakes and making the care potentially better with some of those things to accentuate what the human docs are good at too, is really exciting.
Yeah, no, sepsis and mistakes, I think, might be the top two reasons why people die in hospitals.
Yep. And we went through that before with some of my parents when they were in there. Love our healthcare workers. Okay. Don't want that to be a mixed message here. Absolutely love them. But those are hard jobs. And to your point, it's coming fast and furious at you all day long. And you're coming in and out of rooms and different demands and putting out fires. And we always say at PFN, there's no such thing as a podcasting emergency. In other words, it helps us always have the context of we're dealing with whenever we have challenges, they're pretty small challenges. When you're in a hospital, you're talking life and death stuff. It's really important work that's being done. And I'd see that, with these workers. And my sisters and I, we take copious notes of things. But even if we didn't have those notes, sometimes what would get lost in translation when there would be a shift change of, oh no, the dose of the medication is supposed to be this. Oh no, the treatment plan, this is what's actually supposed to be done. You think those things are in line. It was pretty alarming to us how many times mistakes happen on those things and could mean life or death for your loved one in the hospital. And to think if there's going to be ways here really soon that we can start to cut down on those, that's tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful. Yeah. I'm sorry that you had those challenges with your parent. That's no fun.
Hey, it's all the things that we go through, but I don't know about you, but I don't plan on ever being in a hospital. I believe so much in AI that I'm going to be 140, 150, and I'm going to be out there just in my Sprinter van like you and your buddy, and, just living life to the fullest like I am in my 40s right now. But that was something that was really eye-opening when I thought about, hey, these folks, they have hard jobs, really important jobs, and it's coming at them fast and furious. So to see that there's already data coming back from patients that's hey, my experience with working with the AI nurse or the AI doc, to your point, Chris, that I love the word that you used, was that it was fully present and listening. That's big. That's huge.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
So going back real quick, we were talking about does it seem like people are working longer and harder? And this is going to segue into the life work integration thing I want to get into with you. But it was Upwork that did the study. And I don't know all the parameters of the study, but it was around roughly 77% sampling of the American workforce was reporting that now more work than what they used to do, even with the use of AI. And so, just thinking about, what we were talking about earlier of, does it feel like it speeds up the next thing coming at you? Maybe there is a certain element to that.
I think it speeds up, but again, I really, really wonder, has there been any intentionality behind it? Are they just using it to add things, and are they figuring out what they can let go of? Because it's one of the number one things I work with my CEOs when I'm doing the advisory work is the phrase, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it's the kind of thing that, oh, well, we have this new tool, so we have to add this, and it's adding this, and then we'll add this, and we'll add this on top. And it's just oh my God, should we be doing all this? And the reality is most of the time, no. I think that's where bureaucracies, whether it be in hospitals, governments, big businesses, that starts to be created. Well, we've always done it this way. We have to keep doing it. Well, why? We have all these new tools. Can we let go of 90% of this and actually come up with this other thing that's much, much more efficient, and it's actually better, faster, cleaner, and you can do it in a quarter of the time? But I think it's people aren't looking at it that way.
I guarantee you're right. and you see it in what you do with executives. And I'm speaking from experience here, just for myself, that as I'm adding things, I'm not also taking things off the plate. I'm really bad at that. I keep doing the things I've been doing, but I'm just adding more onto it. And that's a good, wise reminder there, Chris, that as we're continuing to add things, we need to also be thinking about not only setting up the new things for success to help us, but what are the things that it can help take off the plate and make sure that actually happens so that we don't feel like we're in this rat race. And that's a good segue into life work integration. Let's start talking about that. This concept of a lot of people maybe feeling like they're working harder than ever, more hours than ever right now. And can life work integration, has that contributed maybe to some of that? Like we're talking about earlier, where if people are working from home, that maybe demands from home are, a little bit more intrusive at times into work and vice versa. Or just kind of your overall take, your philosophy on life work integration. Is it a direction we should head in the future of work? Or is it healthier for people maybe if there is a little bit more of like a clean separation of like, here's my time that I'm working and here's when I'm shutting it down kind of thing?
So I would say both. Um, I believe that work-life balance, the concept of work-life balance, unfortunately, it's bunk. I don't think it's possible anymore. Unless you're doing the type of job that doesn't ever have anything come through one way or another on a smartphone. If you're a shift worker and you're going in, you're working in a factory, or you're doing, a call center, whatever it may be, and you can definitively, when it's done, great. Now, people always say, well, when we have the idea to work from home, I think working from home is fantastic. I'm looking at the tallest peak in Colorado. I'm 15 minutes away from the trailhead. I am the luckiest cat on the planet. But I have to make sure I put a lot of clear intentionality behind it. I think a healthy work-life integration is 100% possible, but you have to put the intentionality behind it. If you don't, we end up in that reactionary shit show all day long, day in, day out, day in, day out, because we can be connected 24/7. Now, some people say from a business perspective, well, the business is taking advantage of me because I'm at home and they can, and I answer emails at midnight and I do all these other things. Part of that is poor management on the leader's perspective in setting expectations. I have some leaders who maybe they wake up in the middle of the night, they got a great idea and they send it out to their people. Well, their people get it. It's like, oh God, I got to respond to this immediately. And it's like, no, I just wanted to get it out of my head. But there's this perceived back and forth. And so it's like, so teaching the leaders is like, look, just schedule the goddamn thing out at 9 a.m. the next day. And now, and let that roll. Now, I don't do that myself sometimes. I should, but I don't. But what it does is it starts creating this constant expectations. And when you think about the people who've created the phones, who've created all of the apps, they have people who also work, who come from Vegas, who are very, very focused on how do we stimulate and how do we constantly, so that's why we have bells and whistles and noises and pictures and emojis and all this little shit. So we're getting these constant stimulus all the time. I've turned all notifications off my phone because I want to be present when I'm working on something and be present. But it's easy to react. It's just like, okay, well, I'm at dinner and bing, okay, just a second. I'm just like, no, just enjoy dinner. But we have to create those guardrails, those boundaries. And as senior leaders, senior leader first off has to give themselves permission. And this sounds like bullshit, but it's true. It's one of the bigger challenges is understanding that a senior leader, one of the key things, like when I'm starting with somebody new, is like, hey, how you sleeping? And they're like, what the hell does that have to do anything with leadership? Well, tell me how you sleeping. It's like, I get 3 hours a night and it's great. It's like, okay. And just by the tone, you can tell. It's like, so do you think you're reacting, or do you think you're actually in a position that you're taking a breath and you're figuring out where you want to be? What's your home life like? What do you mean? Your relationships, your friend, your family, your kids. Well, what does that have to do? It's like, look, Mama ain't happy at home. You bring that to the office, you're not going to be happy. You're going to be in reactionary mode. You're not going to do what you need to do. So making sure that when you're there, and this is where I say the number one gift we can give anyone right now, including ourselves, is the gift of being present. If we're ultra present when we're with somebody, we can accomplish more engagement, more connectivity in 10 minutes than we can in 2 hours of constantly scrolling. So if we could help people start to transition to think about what does that look like? Because the reality is when your physical, mental, and spiritual health are good, when your relationships at home, your family, your friends, your partner, when things start to look better, you're actually going to make better decisions as a senior leader. You're going to be able to stop and take a breath and not constantly be in that reactionary shit show. And you're saying, no, is this the right thing? Should we just be throwing AI at everybody? Or should we actually take a step back and define what are we trying to achieve out of this? What does success look like? And that's where leaders genuinely start to become leaders. But we have to help people transition that, because I can talk about that all day long. But if somebody's just running around with their hair on fire playing whack-a-mole, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. So I usually take people through one of 4 phases, which I call stabilize, visualize, strategize, and execute. Stabilize means how do we get them to just stop and take a breath, even if it's something silly. I have people like, if you have a commute, turn your radio off, turn your phone off, and just have silence for whatever your commute is. If it's 10 to an hour, whatever, and let yourself think. But so often, one of the things that we are losing, I think, in the connectivity and the reactionary shit show is we're not learning how to think anymore. And if you think about it, if you've ever stood in the shower for that extra 3 minutes and just let the water roll over the top of your head, that's when those ideas, bing, oh man, I do. Those are where those big shifts come in how we're thinking. And as we have all these new tools and all these new resources, that becomes our highest and best use, is how do we cultivate that ability to actually learn how to think and start figuring out what the solutions on those bigger problems are in those different ways. That's why I do the hiking. So taking that into account, when people can start to think about what does success look like, and they start saying, okay, no, I want to approach my life in a holistic way so that I may work at home, cool, but I'm going to set guardrails and boundaries around when I do that. And when I'm doing unicorn fun time with my daughter, I am on the ground 100% present with that. Or if I go out to dinner and it's a burger and fries, but somebody made that to me and they brought it to me, what a gift, and I'm with somebody that I care about, I'm going to be ultra present instead of checking my scores. It's those little shifts, but we have to put the intentionality in that, because we have so many societal pressures and there's so many tools that are completely wired to pull us out of that. So I kind of got on my soapbox a little bit there, but Jason, what do you think of all that?
I'm glad you got on your soapbox. I think step 2 of your 4-step, that step 2 after visualize is stabilize, is brilliant. And I feel like I'm going to step in the confession box here with you, Father, for a minute. I got to tell you, Chris, like, as you were talking, I was like, you know what's sad to me, that one of my biggest fears in the world is losing my phone. What the hell is that? That I would be worried, like, oh, how am I going to do my job if I don't have my phone? How am I going to get in touch with people if I don't have my phone? How am I going to stay up to date on things that are going on in the world if I don't have my phone? As you were talking, it just struck me like how sad that is. But that the solution, to your point, if I'm hearing you correctly, is not to be like, hey, just totally do away with your phone. Like, maybe for some people, maybe that is what you want to do. But I need to put forth the intentionality of saying, you know what, I'm going to put a plan in place and say, hey, the phone is going here. Whenever I'm, quote unquote, when I'm kind of checking out from work, and I'm going to go be with my wife and my sons, like, leave the phone upstairs in my office or something where it's totally out of sight. That way it's not even around where I'm thinking, oh, let me hop into Slack and see if there's anything real quick that I need to take care of, or let me check my emails. Because that's how my brain is always programmed right now, is to think like, okay, Yep, let me be present. Let me go shoot some hoops with my son. But in the back of my head, my phone is over there in the garage, and I'm thinking, oh, you know what? Hey, let's take a time out. I'm going to go over. I just want to check my phone and make sure that I didn't get any urgent messages that have come through. That's like the pattern. The habit that I have started to set up in my brain is thinking that, oh, I need to be on 24/7 and I need to do this, even when in those moments I need to be 100% present with the person that I'm with. And I'm saying that today, like I said, I'm stepping in the confessional box because as you were saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's some things I need to change today. And it's that stabilized piece. I need to quiet my mind so that I can be present in those circumstances with those people. My family, in this case, that I'm referencing, 100%. And not thinking, oh, I need to go over and check my phone like every 15 or 30 minutes. And that's going to take some work for me to do. And I imagine probably for a lot of our listeners today too.
Okay, so can I give you some incentive that might be uncomfortable?
Of course.
Okay. More importantly, for your team, your staff, for your son, for your spouse, what behaviors are you modeling to them when you do those things?
Well, it communicates that that's more important. And that's not good.
And that to me, from a motivation standpoint, just seeing your body language and the way you talk about shooting hoops with your son, if it's you letting go for you, okay. But if it's you setting a good example for your son, I bet that just got a whole lot easier. And it's just like, okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yep.
So if you can use that as a motivation, because it also does that with your team. And then if you establish parameters and expectations, it'll help. A few stories on this, because it seems like this is resonating with you. One, I had a CEO who he loves his family and he's very focused on working with his family. And he came home one time and he was literally sitting on the floor with his daughter playing Unicorn Fun Time or Barbie or something. And she finally said, "Daddy, why don't you just go away?" He's like, "Why?" Because he'd been scrolling on his phone. He goes, "You like your phone better than me." And that crushed this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Just crushed him. But it helped him understand that it's okay to put the phone in the box when he comes home. And then go an hour later and check on it. But it also models really good behaviors for his family, but also for your staff. And it starts taking away that constant, because when you're living in that, oh, do I need to check? Oh, do I need to? You're starting to get in a cortisol state. You're in that fight or flight state. And there's been tests, as I understand it, where standardized tests of kids, where if they can even see their phone, even if it's off, they score lower on the test.
Wow.
Because they're distracted. So if I'm doing like a full day strategy session, I turn my phone off and I ask everybody in the room, turn your phone off. And when we're on breaks, we can turn it on. Because if there's a great book called How to Decide, but it talks about how poor we are at, it was, that one's called The One Thing. But it talks about how poor we are at multitasking. And that if you're in deep cognitive thought working on something and your phone even vibrates or buzzes, it'll pull you out of that. And it'll take 3 to 5 times as long to get back
Wow.
to that state. So part of when we say we don't have enough time is most people are living their life all day long in transition, in reactionary mode. They're not actually getting deep to what they need to do. But if they can be present and turn their phone off and stay laser focused on the project they're working on for 20 minutes, you can get done. You can bend time. You can get 4 hours worth of work done in 20 minutes if you can be all heads down and focused.
Mm-hmm.
You spend 4 hours and your phone's going off like a slot machine all the time. You're not going to get shit done. You're constantly checking and looking, and but again, this is creating those habits around how do we intentionally start figuring those things out to do it in a different way. But it's building a healthy, fully integrated life that's intentional. But when you do these things, everything starts to expand and get better and better and better. Like other simple things like I I need to get back in this habit. Confession. But normally, the best blog post, the highest volume response I got, it came across that my wife and I were having marital issues because I would be at the restaurant, my eyes would wander, and I'd go off to the restroom and talk, and I'd be gone too long, and then Rika would start. My wife would say, "Oh, is she coming with us? Oh, I see you brought her," and she refers to my phone as her, and it's just like so
Wow.
now because it was distraction, it was not being present, it was so now she stays in the car when we go to a restaurant. But go to a five-star restaurant and you will see 70, 80% of the people in that restaurant who are paying for an experience are scrolling on stupid shit on TikTok or some other thing. It's not nearly what it is. So I don't know. I think it's that intentionality that's there.
That's
But
so good. I'll give you another one, a real world example, probably for a lot of people listening that this will tie into. If you ever go to your kids' sporting events, practices in particular, I've noticed it more with practices. Look around at the parents. What are they doing when they're in the bleachers or the stands? Very few of them are actually watching practice and what their kids are doing, getting work done.
right, right.
And I'm partially raising my hand here. I at least was trying to be cognizant of it, and I'm like, nope, I'm putting this down for a while. I'm actually going to watch them practice for a bit. But like, I look around and I'm like, there's some of the parents that literally their head is not coming up once from their phone screen to take a look and see at their kid practicing and the things that they're learning and they're doing. And the word that you used that I love there that really helped frame this for me, Chris, is transition. That it feels like we're living in transition all day long. And I'll tell you, at People Forward Network, one of the things we're really proud of, we're still working on it, but something we just recently put into place in the last few weeks is calendar blocking and setting time aside in one of our team meetings to actually implement it and make sure it's applied for each person in their calendars. Each person owns their time blocking, but we're like, you know what? If it's one of those things we say, hey, here's what time blocking is, you should be doing it. Sometimes it won't get done. We actually use some time together in a meeting and said, next 5 minutes, start blocking it, recurring time on your calendar for your most important prios and deep work, and set it as a consistent thing that happens each week. And I'll tell you, since we did that, I know for me personally, that has been a huge help of feeling like you're not just in transition all the time during the day. There was a book called The Tyranny of the Urgent. You probably heard of it before. Or maybe that wasn't the name of the book, but the concept of if you don't do those types of things that you're talking about, that you coach leaders on, that your calendar gets away from you and you're just responding reactionary mode all day long, transition, like you said, and you're not getting the really important work done. Where I want to go with that is this concept of how you're bringing this to life in our personal lives is think about time blocking in like your personal life. Like as soon as you're done, like saying like, hey, from 5 to 7 or 8, if you've got a young family like I do, that time blocked, that's deep work where I'm focused solely on the family. The phone is totally gone. Or we're not doing it. And so taking that time blocking concept and applying it to personal life could probably help some too.
I 100% agree. And I would encourage you to take it a step further, even with your team, and create accountability partners
Okay.
so that so when I teach that with groups, we try and get it to where they have accountability partners so that if somebody is going to shut down or they're going to put headphones on or they're going to go silent, cool. In that case, during those 2 hours, when Jason's head's down, only one other person has the ability to come and and interrupt him basically the building has to be on fire or somebody's dying. Other than that, but that way you end up creating gatekeepers. But on the same respect, if you're not doing it, so like my chief of staff, there will be times where I'm time blocked out, but I'm sneaking back into my email and stuff. And she sees that. And I had one nasty gram from her. It's like, you get your email one more time, I'm going to change the password. So
I love that.
it's creating those accountabilities. So if you're going to do that with your spouse, cool, great. Rachel, hey, I want to be ultra focused on this and realize I got a little bit of an addiction issue with this stuff. So if you could help me, I want to put it away and I want to try it for 1 week where 5 to 7, the phone's in the box and we're here doing family stuff. Will you help support? Because then you're recruiting somebody to be your champion, to help you with it. You're not You're not out there on your own. Plus, if you say it, well, you don't want to let her down. You don't want to embarrass yourself. But again, these are the kinds of the things that we start creating those accountabilities. And this is some of the key behavior when you're creating a really scalable, highly functioning team that the senior leader needs to model. Modeling these behaviors throughout, learning how to think, learning to invest that time. I had a CEO, he ran a multi-billion-dollar nonprofit family office. And he came in and he was exhausted when we met. And his first action items after our first session were schedule a date with his wife with no phone and not turn the radio on when he commuted in and out of the office. And we worked together for quite a while. But at the end of that first year, we were doing a full day session with his team, and he pulled me aside and said, I want to thank you because you actually taught me how to think this year.
Wow.
We don't learn how to think. We don't learn how to lead. We learn how to do. And that's what everybody is constantly rewarding is doing, not actually thinking about what we should be doing and how we can model those behaviors in the right ways.
Well, I didn't realize this is such a good conversation, but it's also good coaching. I'm getting free coaching here from you, Chris. This is good today, man. This is really good. But that point, like, I know when Rachel listens to this episode, she's going to be like, you need to listen to Chris on that stuff. That's so good. But I know a lot of leaders are struggling with this. I'm sure you're seeing it too, that just like the constantly feeling like you got to be on all the time and thinking about work, even when it's quote unquote not work hours, that you just gave some really practical good tips there to help with that. And I'm going to have you be my accountability partner, follow up with me maybe in a couple weeks and be like, hey, Jason, is that cell phone being put away like in phone jail or whatever in your house? And you're focusing. And I see, look, for those that are watching the show, you can see Chris is already looking down. He's jotting down. I can tell you're making a note. You're going to check in with me in 2 weeks, aren't you?
Yes.
I love it. I love it. But seriously, that stuff, and to your point, we've gotten so good at doing that we forget how to think and be present on the things that are so important. Chris, there may be no more important message than that for where we find ourselves right now, because to be honest, we can't compete with AI on certain things. We never will. We can't be on it 24/7 on a specific role or a function. It doesn't have to eat. It doesn't have to sleep. It doesn't have competing demands or interests that are coming at it. And to feel like if that's like the path we feel like we're on, like I've just got to keep up. I've got to squeeze more into the day. I've got to get more done. That path will lead to burnout. And at the end of the day, you will never be able to outcompete on doing those types of things compared to where AI is going. That's where AI can thrive. That's its strength zone. We have strengths in other areas, if I'm hearing you right, that we should be focusing on.
Very, very much so. But let me do a little positive spin. Instead of cell phone jail,
Okay.
how about calling it focused family time? That's a positive rather than the more you can keep the spin going in your head in the right way. But it's the focus time, focused family time. And with this is why I think this type of thinking is so important. And don't get me wrong, this is a habit. This is a skill to learn. I remember I read the book about multitasking. I thought, well, I'm pretty important. I can multitask. I'm good at things, but I'll try this. And I remember literally saying, I'm going to go 20 minutes, phone off, just on one thing. And 12 minutes later, somehow I ended up standing in front of the fridge and I didn't even realize I'd gotten there.
Wow.
I mean, it's just weird how, but if you can give yourself the permission to just have the open space in your head, and maybe you don't think about anything or silly stuff for 2 hours, but in the last 2 minutes, you're like, oh, wait a minute. That to me, especially as a senior leader, making sure that you put yourself in the right environments, that you're having the right conversations, that you're really, really, really being curious and listening, that you're getting out of the office to do those things that are important, that you're researching in your way. I don't know if you've ever seen Warren Buffett go through and talk about his calendar.
Yes.
But there's a lot of weeks where he might have nothing or a haircut on Thursday. And other than that, It's quiet time for him to read, research, and think. Now, this is one of the things. As a frontline person, you may have to make a decision every 90 seconds. But as you progress and get higher and higher and higher and higher and higher up the leadership chain, you get to the point where maybe you're a senior leader. Think about Buffett. He may only make 10 decisions, 5 decisions a year, but they might be multi-billion-dollar decisions that if he does it wrong, they're bad. But if he's in the weeds saving time and he misses one of those decisions, it could cost him billions. So the higher up the leadership chain you go, a lot of times the more time we need to be thinking about in investing. I hate the word spending, but investing our time. Where do we choose to invest our time? It's our most valuable asset because it's the only asset that diminishes every second. And where do we choose to invest our time is really, really important. And as we end up with all this disruption and all these challenges and all these changes, it's within that disruption, if people are choosing to invest that time and energy to say, no, where do we want to be? What does amazing look like? What's possible? How do we do that? Who do we know? That's the heavy lifting. And if it means that you're out on the golf course by yourself, cool. If you're going for a walk or you're going for a hike or you're riding your bike and you're helping, stimulate some healthy attitudes and physicality, great. But it's when we get sucked in the weeds and we're living in that cortisol dump of, oh God, 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 oh God. We don't get shit done. But transitioning to that's where we stabilize. Then we visualize what amazing looks like. Then we strategize. We build a very simplistic plan. We over communicate and we execute with ruthless but compassionate accountability over and over and over. And that's basically the process that I believe really helps drive success for those people. And I've had some good luck, man. I've got a handful of companies where we've gone from entrepreneurial to billion-dollar market caps.
Yep.
I don't know how many huge exits we've had, but it's changing the mindset and helping people adjust those skills and look at it in a different way.
And that's a thing that's really important for people to hear today is this isn't just theory. Like you put these things in practice, like the results to prove it, that this stuff works. Going back to, because I think it's a theme that most everyone struggles with is being too attached to the cell phone in particular, especially after work hours and focusing on family, friends, whatever it might be. I was thinking of an analogy that's similar to that too, Chris, is, I don't know about you, but growing up for me, I am an old millennial or a young Gen Xer, and there were many kids that I knew that their dads wouldn't come home after work. They'd go to the bar. Instead, They weren't present, right? They weren't physically present. Is that all too different than maybe us not being present today if we're on our phones instead? We might be physically at home with the people that we love, but if we're on our phones, is it any different than what was going on then? Those types of things that we saw?
Oh, that's a whole nother topic, but the ability to hide in our phones is hideous. So I'm on the surface level, I'm doing the right thing, but deep in the weeds on, and then you see people like who are they're really serious about it, and you go over and you look, and it's like they're playing Minecraft or something. It's just like, what? Now, and sometimes, don't get me wrong, I have opportunities to get better as well, no question. We all do, but this is a good reminder for me that when we do that, but I do believe from the being present standpoint, if you can be present for yourself when you're out doing your walk, if you can be present with your spouse, and go for, my wife and I, we love to go for walks. So hold her hand and ask her how her day is and look her in her eyes. That goes so much further than me buying her junk and she doesn't care about all that other stuff. It's figuring out what the love language for that individual is. But it's uncomfortable because we're getting out of our traditional way of doing things, because our traditional way of doing things is constant busyness and hiding and distractions. But we're not becoming the people we could be when we're doing that. We don't grow in comfort. Remember, we don't grow physically, mentally, spiritually. We don't grow in comfort. We only grow in discomfort. I've done a fair amount of ultra marathons and things, and you don't get stronger if you don't sometimes have some aches and pains and push and wow, this is weird. Okay, I'll give it a try. And getting to that point, but it's through those terms that we grow and we become better. And again, as a senior leader, it's going to help model the right behaviors and being able to have the places where we can have those conversations.
So ultra marathons, I do CrossFit. I've done it for a few years now, and let me tell you that is a humbling experience in your mid 40s, trying to keep up with folks that are in their 20s and 30s doing the workouts of the day. It's very challenging, but I'll tell you, one of the things that it has helped me with is it gives me clarity of mind, because I'll go do it during the day. Again, I love life work integration, flexible work with People Forward Network, is because during the day I can go work out for an hour and come back home from my CrossFit gym, and it helps me just get that mental clarity. But one of the learnings that you just shared, it was kind of echoed in a different way by the owner of this CrossFit gym. His name is Bryn. Shout out to Bryn. I'll have to have him listen to this episode and watch it so that he can hear all the cool stuff that you're sharing, Chris, and how we're tying it into CrossFit. But he mentioned a few weeks ago, he said, when you're showing up here at CrossFit, the weights aren't changing. The weights are the same. The difference is you're getting stronger. And you may hate me when you show up and you see the workout, and I'm making you do stuff that you would never do at home on your own, or that you do at most other gyms. But guess what? The weight didn't quote unquote get easier. The weight didn't change itself. What changed is you. You got stronger because you did something that you didn't think was possible. And what's really cool about the way at this particular CrossFit gym, they structure a lot of the classes, they try and do it in groups where you're working on teams, right? That accountability piece that you're talking about. But I think that's such an important lesson that you were referencing too, is we grow through what we go through. And I know that sounds like a cliche term, but it really is true, that you don't grow and adapt and get better at things by doing things the same old way and by doing the old habits. That'll keep you at status quo. And some people, maybe you're happy with status quo. But if you're truly wanting to sharpen, if you're wanting to get stronger, you're wanting to get better, you're wanting to be truly this thing you hear all the time of being the best version of yourself, that requires change. That requires doing challenging things and going through challenging things to stretch and grow you. And I think that's a really important perspective, especially for what a lot of people are feeling right now in their work, of feeling stretched and challenged in different ways. That you got to believe that it's on a path that's leading toward a better place, and that's going to lead you to grow and become a better version of yourself. That it's just a season that you go through to on the path of being the best version of you that you can be. So I love that message that you're sharing.
Part of what on my website, at chriskluver.com, we have the idea that extraordinary lives in the unreasonable. I think that it's up to us to be unreasonable and look at things. And the part of the reason we went to the Antarctic is I wanted to go to, there was an Antarctic explorer, Ernest Shackleton. And it's the greatest story of failure. He's probably the best leader in time of crisis ever. They lost their ship in 1914 in the Weddell Sea, frozen. It took 2 years to get out, and he got out safely. I went to his grave on this ultra remote island. But when I say that the extraordinary lives in the unreasonable, one of the biggest challenges, though, that most people have, and this happens for leaders, but in a fully integrated life, and this is some of the stuff we work on in peer circles and other pieces, is we have to set those goals. But to the Henry Ford quote, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. When you set these unreasonable goals, amazing things happen. And it can happen with your family. It can happen with your health. It can happen with your business. I had my hip and my knee replaced about 9 years ago. And my wife does ultra run 50 milers. And I started figuring out that I could actually do a 50K, and I'd never done any long run.
Wow.
And so, but it didn't mean that I just sat there. And so this is where we stabilize. It's like we figure out what we want. We visualize, what does extraordinary look like for your business, for your family, for your health, for different pieces. And then we set goals. We strategize on how it's going to happen. So I didn't just sit on the couch then and eat ho-hos and Twinkies and hope for the best, but I got a great coach. I lost a whole bunch of weight. I followed what my coach told me to do. It was not comfortable, but I showed up every day and got it done. And I was able to do ultra marathons, which is crazy. But we've gone through from a work-life integration standpoint and reviewed that over and over to where that's one of the reasons we moved out here is I have friends who are 10 years my senior who can smoke my ass on a bicycle or when it comes to skiing or biking. I want to put myself in an environment that has that, but we do the same applications with work and with business. Now, as a self-employed person, I'm very disciplined when I'm working. One thing we didn't talk about on the work-life integration, we talked a lot about what it is to shut it off when we go home. But one of the things that people don't like talking about, and the other end of that equation is, if you're coming to the office, I don't want to be paying for you to be on your phone all day long. Or if you are, I need to have a trust that you aren't on Facebook all day, that you aren't doing games and everything else. Because in the traditional sense, you would get an hour for lunch and a 15-minute break for personal and a 15-minute break for personal in the morning and the afternoon. And other than that, all of that other time is my time as the employer. And making sure, just as we set up guardrails at home to be away from work, one of the other things that is almost never talked about is creating guardrails when we are at work from outside world. And that's something it popped back in my head. I wanted to bring back in.
No, I think that's a good point, Chris, because so again, I'm going to filter this just through my lens. So my wife and I, we have 4 sons that are 11 and under. The older 2, they're in school. So they get on the bus in the morning and they're gone. The twins, who are our youngest, they're not in school yet. So they're still at home. And so, it's really easy for my workday sometimes to kind of look like a jet ski instead of an aircraft carrier. And by that, I mean, I want to be that aircraft carrier that's like, hey, 4 or 5 hours, no disturbances. This is the thing I'm focused on, and we are going to make this amount of progress on it. But a lot of times what happens is one of them will pop through the door, want to tell me about something. Maybe I'm going to help change like a diaper or a pull-up, go help, get him some lunch ready or something like that. And so there's just kind of like a lot of those interference type things that happen. But to your point is there's both this beauty, but there's also this challenge of working from home, particularly if you do have young kids, of figuring out that balance of making sure you're on and you're getting your stuff done because your team and your clients depend on you. And then also making sure that you're taking care of some of those other things too. And so it just makes it really challenging. To your point, if you don't have a good structure in place, good communication in place, like with your family members in this case, to be like, hey, these are the times that I'm on. You can't come into my office, but whenever I come out of my office, then it's fair game kind of stuff. Those are many times the types of things that go unsaid or they're not taken care of, that can create more of those disruptions and make it feel like it's more challenging to make progress and to get the stuff done that you need to.
In my first book, The Aspiring Solopreneur, we talk a lot about setting up those boundaries and understanding that you have to create the boundaries and position around it. I saw at the beginning of COVID, I'd be working with leadership teams. It's like, Jesus, you guys look like you're at a fishing camp. Everybody was disheveled, and which is their call. But there is something to say that if you dress up, you prepare, you dress up, you get ready like you're going to work, even if you're wearing cute fuzzy slippers. But when you walk into that room, if you can, and you shut the door, then you're at work. And that you just may only have a 2-second commute that transitions through the doorway, but helping the family understand that when the door is closed, that is a non-negotiable, unless obviously there's safety or issues. But for the most part, no, it's when the door is closed, you're in that workspace. And then when you leave, I love the idea that you're fair game when you're outside the door. But establishing those parameters, those boundaries, but then also remembering that sometimes it's easy to get sucked into those. But if you have an office at home, you may leave your office or your phone in the office, and make sure you go for a walk at lunch. and you leave your phone in the office. I thought I was so important, the first time I turned my phone off all day. This is going to be a shit show when I turn my phone on at the end of the day. No, my chief of staff handled everything. Oh, I should probably handle these two things.
Yeah.
I can do that tomorrow. Huh. I mean, it got to the point where I carried a pager to where I turned my phone off all day, and my chief of staff would page me if there was something I needed.
How long ago was that? Like, you still have the pager now, or how long ago was that you had a pager?
Oh, it's probably 5 years ago.
Okay. So that still is like, whoa, not many people using a pager 5 years ago. So that's interesting.
No, people are like, dude, what kind of drugs are you dealing? It's like, no. But it never got used. So I quit.
Yeah.
I quit keeping it. But it was crazy to actually have that. But there's actually settings now in your phone that you can turn everything off, but just have one person who has access to it that can ring through, or different aspects. But again, it's about, it's high level, Jason. It's about permission to look at things differently and really become the person you want to be. It's about letting things go and giving yourself permission to not have to be busy all the time, and really leaning into thinking about, how do we want to start thinking? What are the behaviors we want to model for those around us? And how do we define where success goes?
And a lot of these lessons, Chris, regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what your role or title is, how big your company is, the things you're sharing today, the type of work that you do at Entrepreneurial Advisors, it's literally good for every single human being that's trying to navigate and do their best through change, and focus on working on the best version of themselves. When you think about the future of work and where we're headed, I want to think about this through the entrepreneurial lens. What are some really good lessons you think, even aside from the ones we've already covered, what are some additional lessons that you often instill with leaders around this entrepreneurship mindset that's really important for all leaders moving forward in the future of work? Are there some other big-time lessons or secrets or tips that you found are really important as they're trying to navigate through change?
What jumps in my head is the idea around vulnerability.
Okay.
And being open and candid with things. A lot of times, like in our peer circles, people join those because they have this imposter syndrome. They're like, wow, I've been elevated to this title. I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. Or who am I to be here? Or I don't feel like I'm doing a good job. And especially if you're a CEO, you get stuck between, well, I don't want to look bad and ask the stupid questions with my leadership team. If it's a privately held or private equity type company, I'm definitely not going to my board. So they end up stuck in this position, and it could be those 3 a.m. thoughts where people get stuck in these doom loops of just like, and you end up losing sleep, and it gets really counterproductive. And one of the things that I've learned that's been the most valuable, because I have probably almost 20,000 hours of facilitation, is asking the question, I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I have the confidence that together we can figure it out. But being vulnerable and saying, I don't understand this, or I need help, but having that vulnerability, but also a spirit of curiosity. There are so many people, I see this more often with young or insecure leaders, is they think they need to be dictatorial in how they lead. And that's not the right way to do that. I mean, sometimes you may have to make a hard decision that nobody wants to hear. Too bad. Suck it up, buttercup. That's the way it is. But let's make sure that we're collaborative in understanding what people are thinking. But when you can be curious and understand, and then say, all right, this is what we're doing and this is why. But creating that trusting environment is going to require that person understand that they aren't going to have all the answers. And that sometimes they may be filled with imposter syndrome, and it's okay. And they can talk with other people to help try and understand how they're going to break through those ceilings and get to those other areas. But the reality is the skills it takes for an organization, individual, team, relationship that it took to get from here to here are going to be different than the skills it takes to get from here to here. And making sure that those individuals are investing in themselves and developing that is how that's going to expand it. When a senior leader knows that they're becoming the choke point on the growth of the company, that's when they're at a watershed moment. They either need to figure out how to get help and transition through that, or maybe they need to step aside and get somebody else in there who can take it to the next level. So I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of bounced around in there, but I think it comes down to the modeling the right behaviors, being curious, being willing to be wrong and not understand, and an understanding that everybody goes through some form of that imposter syndrome, that scarcity, and that we have to be improving and developing ourselves, always sharpening our tools.
I love those. You had another one too I want to touch on with you that was in a LinkedIn post that you put out recently, or maybe your digital twin put it out on LinkedIn. By the way, make sure you follow Chris, before we wrap up later today, but on LinkedIn, Kris Kluver, Chris with a K, Kluver with a K. Need to follow his content. But you had one on delegation, the importance of delegating responsibility and decision making in an organization so that you don't get those bottlenecks. That seems like a really important one too, because I'm just speaking from my experience. Someone who enjoys solving problems like I do, if you feel the pressure, if you feel timelines coming up, then sometimes what that means is you'll be like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go solve this real quick. Let me hop in and just get this fixed and get this done and get it shipped kind of thing, right? But it's so important to your point. You were talking about how, like if you put your phone on silent, like if you're at a retreat or something, and then you come back and it's like, oh, my chief of staff, actually everything was taken care of. I think a lot of leaders would be surprised if delegation is done well, how many fires would be put out, how many things are actually taken care of that may be coming your way if you set up good systems of delegation for that. So talk with us about this concept of delegation, how to do it well, because I think that's another important one for a lot of leaders.
So again, skills that got you where you are aren't going to get you where you need to be. And always being able to do an assessment of where you are. So there's two parts to this. One is identifying what needs to be delegated. And then two is the actual process of delegating. So one of the exercises I have people start with is basically go through, and if you just identified in the course of a day, what is it you do in roughly 15-minute blocks? This alone, the awareness that it can create to you is like, well, holy shit, I was in transitions firefighting for 3/4 of my day. All right, well then maybe you can figure out how to time block that and have time blocked office hours. That if people have issues, great, you can come to me, but you need to come to me with, and we can even talk about some of the challenges around that. But when you do that, that has value. Then if you go through and say, all right, well, what is my time worth? Well, you actually know what your time is worth. If you make, I don't need to know what you make 100 grand a year, divided by 40 hours a week, times 50 weeks a year. I know we all work more than that, but let's say 2,000 hours. You've officially said my time is worth $50 an hour. Okay. If you go through and attach a dollar piece to each one of those segments that you do throughout the day, if you're doing anything that's under $50 an hour, well, candidly, right there, you're fiduciarily irresponsible and you're stealing from your company. You should be then starting to define, who can I delegate to? Now, there's different quadrants we can look at. There are things that we love and we're great at. There are things we like and we're good at. There's things that we're okay at. And there's things that we hate and we suck at. We want to start delegating anything that we hate and we suck at, and we can get somebody else to do cheaper. So I have 4 companies. I have a couple of accountants and a couple of bookkeepers. But if you ask me to fill out a government form, there's an 80% chance I'm going to screw it up and my eyes bleed. I hate it. I can't fathom that. But my accountants and bookkeepers love them. They love it. I think they're freaks of nature, but that happens to be their love grade. And I can delegate those things out, which then gives me bandwidth to not have to deal with something. And then maybe it's around creating content. Maybe it's around doing a podcast. Maybe it's around going for a walk and thinking. But it's coming up because everybody, especially in the senior leaders level, is going to have 1 or 2 or 3 activities that could be worth thousands of dollars an hour, whether it be relationships, whether it be thinking, whether it be new ideas. And if you're not giving yourself the space to do those things because I'm saving money doing something else that you suck at, then you're holding the growth of the organization back. But it's through delegation. And ultimately what we're looking for is, as a senior leader, we're looking to create amazing teams who love what they do, or at least like what they do, and are pretty good at it most of the time. You do that and you've got self-actualization. As you guys said on your pod the other day, people are doing their work that fills their soul. You find jobs that people are doing that they fills their soul, and you create crystal clear expectations and accountabilities on what they're accountable for. And then we create some sort of metric that allows them to have clarity to understand, did I win this week or did I not? Was I successful? Then it also gives clarity for you. But there's all sorts of different tools that we can start to delegate into. I'll pause on that, Jason. You tell me where your head goes. What do you think?
I think those are good. And where my head goes, Chris, then is helping those leaders understand, because I hear this from them sometimes, is I'm struggling to know, even beyond the delegation pieces, when it comes to decision making, what are the things that I should be making the decision on, and what should I entrust my team members to be making decisions on? Do you have any good rules or good tools on kind of like a matrix or a framework of thinking about that? Because I hear that from a lot of leaders. Like, I want them to make more decisions, but I'm not sure which are the ones that I should make and which are the ones that they should make.
So let me take a half step back on that, and we'll hit. Have you ever heard of the victim triangle?
I have. Now, I need a refresher. Go through it for me real quick,
victim,
but I've heard of it before.
The savior and the persecutor.
Yep.
So usually, let's say you bring a new employee on, and they come in and they say, and they're like, okay, Jason, I'm not sure how to handle this. What should I do? Well, at that point, they're kind of a victim. So you say, well, you should do this and this and this and this. And you help them. You're their savior. But the reality is you're not. You just taught them that if they have a problem, to bring it to you and you'd solve it. Now, that's okay if it's one person, maybe two. But when we get to 4 or 5 people, well, we end up transitioning from being the savior to where it's like, damn it, I don't have time for this. You do this, you do that, you handle it this way. You know what? I can just get it done faster. I'll do it. And we transition from being the savior, they're still the victim, to where we become the persecutor. And as a result, we end up becoming the victim ourselves. So the traditional way that people, when they create that awareness, are like, oh shit, this is all self-inflicted. That's my fault. Okay, cool. All right. Don't come to me with any problems. Only come to me with solutions. That's a start. But realistically, people are only going to come to you with solutions that are easiest for them. They aren't necessarily thinking about the other consequences associated with it. So the next step is, okay, look, I want you to come to me, but I want you to come to me with 3 potential options. Okay, that's great. That's starting in the right direction. I take it a step further, and there's a book called Make the Noise Go Away that I stole this from. But it talks about a consequences matrix, where it's a one piece of paper, and anybody can come to anybody. I roll this out with some of my teams, to the CEO. You can come to the CEO with any question, provided you have, this is the issue that you're addressing. This is the solution you think you need to get to, or the outcome you're looking to get to. And then you go through and you say, we could do this, and this is the consequence of that. We could do nothing, and this is what the consequence is. We could go scorched earth, and this is the consequence. And come up with 4 alternatives with what the potential consequences are. When somebody comes with that one sheet, well, it helps them start learning and looking and through and problem solving it themselves. And they're usually going to say, I think we should do this. But what's more important is for the senior leader, is that senior leader sees, oh, I see how this person's thinking. And I didn't even think of the second option. That's a great option. Or if there's holes, they can coach them up and say, okay, well, did you take into account this? What about the logistics? What about our planning? Do we have any financial exposure? But it ends up as a coaching tool so that we empower those people below to really start understanding. And then as a senior leader, we can trust them. Because more often than not, people are like, okay, Kluver said I need to delegate. So they throw the keys and say, all right, kid, drive it like you stole it. And then they get pissed off that it's in the ditch. And they're like, well, I knew that was going to happen. It's self-fulfilling prophecy. So how do we transition that? And it's where it's going to take more time, but it's actually building that leader, and it's teaching a behavior that can be taught further down the line that then allows people to understand how we're thinking. So where's your head go with that? What do you think?
Oh, that's really good. That's the deepest explanation with very tangible examples of like step 1, step 2, step 3 that I've ever heard on it. So I think that's very practical and applicable. So Chris, when we think about the future of work, Are there any other topics or kind of like some closing thoughts, words of wisdom around the future of work that you want to speak to leaders today that we haven't already covered that come to mind for you?
So my wife and I have banned the term retirement,
Hmm.
and we've adopted the term rewirement. The construct of a 40-hour traditional work week is made up basically by Henry Ford and some other guys. We don't have to do that. We can do whatever the hell we want. We can use it in whatever ways we want. I think that the excess capacity models, particularly of parents at home who maybe used to be a pro, but now they want to work 15, 20 hours a week, and we give them certain guidelines and perspectives around that, I think there's huge opportunities. I think our perception of what work looks like, I think we're going through a bit of a pendulum swing back after COVID with like Jamie Dimon and the back to works and the government and everything else. I think that there's some reasons for that, and I believe in some of it. But in other areas, I think that with all the new tools and everything that's out there, some of the biggest challenges are going to be for senior leaders to be able to figure out how do we build and manage our teams in the best ways. It's going to be more about building and managing those teams with a lot of the tools, AI and automation, as part of our teams. And how people work and the gig economy and the fractional work, and I think everything is going to be able to change, and it's going to happen at light speed, but we're going to have to be able to stop and pull back and think about it a little bit more.
I love that. From retirement to rewirement. If you haven't trademarked that, you should get some T-shirts made there, Chris. That's awesome. So, and just to support your point there around like so we didn't even really get in that deep on that, but gig economy and fractional work, I do think that's going to be a big part of the future of work. And just some data here to kind of back that up that supports it from last year is currently 47.5% of the American private sector workforce works in large corporations. 46% are working for small businesses, 500 or fewer staff. But here's the thing that really changed last year. An average of 430,000 new business applications per month in 2024. That's 50% more of new business applications than in 2019. And I didn't dig into that deep enough to see where that's coming from. But from other data I've seen, my guess is we have more people that are starting to hang up their shingle and do the fractional work thing. Like I'm a fractional CHRO, I'm a fractional CFO that's working for multiple companies underneath your own LLC or whatever it might be. But also that we have a lot of people that in addition to their quote unquote, their 9 to 5, they've got an extra thing that they're doing and they've spun up an LLC around it, like a passion project of some kind or some kind of gig work that they're doing on the weekend or things like that to try and build that out and start that entrepreneurial journey. So I do think there's data to support what you're saying there too.
I wonder how many of those are podcasts. You need to start helping those because that's your wheelhouse, man.
Hey,
get those people and help them with the podcast.
Okay, I'm jotting that down. That's a good call out. I appreciate that, Chris. So, Chris, as we get ready to wrap up here, man, this has been a blast. We're absolutely going to have you back on again because we covered a lot today. But just like with the gig work and fractional work, we're going to do that one another time because we can have a long conversation on that. But as we wrap up here, let's let our listeners know how they can best get in touch with you and stay in contact with your content because it is so good. So what are the best ways for people to follow you, stay in the know with everything that you're doing at Entrepreneurial Advisors?
All right. Well, best place, and thank you very much, is Chris with a K, Kluver with a K.com. You can also find me at Kris Kluver on LinkedIn. And we are offering a free leadership lunch and learns twice a month, which there's no obligation, expectations. It's a video based, it's on Zoom. And then we are in the process where we're starting to take applications for people who are looking to join our peer circles. We're usually looking for a specific, if it's people who are in industries and they want to set up an industry specific, we can talk through about that. If it's large organizations or private equity or VC firms that are looking to have their whole cadre or stable of companies be involved in it, we can talk through that as well. But with this, just reach out, go to kriskluver.com. That's usually the best place.
Perfect. And again, that's Chris with a K and Kluver with a K.com. to find out all the information of all that good stuff. You got a little taste of it today, but you need the full entree here from Chris and his team of entrepreneurial advisors. You heard the wisdom today. There's so much good stuff on preparing for the future of work, but preparing for it today, being a strong leader today and leading strong organizations that are ready and are moving toward the future of work. That's what it's all about. Chris, thank you so much for being on with us today, and we'll do it again sometime soon.
Jason, my pleasure. Right on. Thank you so much, man. It's fun.
We'll see you next time. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to Working Forward. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Until next time, here's to building tomorrow today.